It was meant to be a celebration, a warm, nostalgic look back at 10 years of Outlander, the series that had reshaped both their lives. The studio lights glowed softly, the set was intimate, just 2 chairs, a table, and a decade of memories resting between them. But no one could have predicted that on this day, Caitríona Balfe would break down in tears, and that Sam Heughan would be beside her, fighting his own. The interview began lightly, laughter, familiar stories, the sort of inside jokes only shared by people who had lived through something extraordinary together. They spoke of first auditions, endless nights on set, freezing Scottish rain, and the quiet camaraderie that had formed between cast and crew. The small audience leaned in, captivated. For fans, seeing Sam and Caitríona together like this felt like witnessing something sacred. But everything shifted with one simple question. The interviewer leaned forward and asked, gently, after all these years, is there anything you regret? Anything you wish you'd done differently? Caitríona smiled at first, as though ready to brush it off. But then her gaze dropped, her voice tightened, and the room stilled. Regret, she echoed softly. That's a complicated one. A heavy silence fell, long enough for everyone to understand something real was surfacing. Then, with trembling hands, she drew in a breath. There were moments, she admitted, her voice cracking, when I wish I'd been braver. When I wish I'd spoken more honestly about what I was feeling. The crew froze. Sam turned toward her slowly, concern overtaking his features. This wasn't scripted. This was truth. Caitríona wiped at her tears, attempting a smile. You spend years pretending to be someone else, saying someone else's words, and somewhere along the way you forget how to express your own. And sometimes when you finally remember, it's too late. Her confession settled over the room like a soft weight. Sam leaned forward instinctively, placing a gentle hand on her arm. He didn't speak, he didn't have to. His touch said everything. She looked at him, eyes shimmering. I think I regret the moments I let fear win, she whispered. Fear of saying too much. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of losing something precious because I didn't know how to hold it. The silence stretched again. Then, almost to herself, she added, I wish I'd told him what he truly meant to me. A collective gasp rippled through the studio. Sam moved, barely, his lips parting, his eyes dropping as if bracing himself against emotion. 10 years of unsaid words suddenly felt unbearably close. He finally exhaled, a quiet, trembling sigh. He reached for her hand, squeezed it gently, and whispered something only she could hear. Whatever it was made her nod, tears spilling freely. The cameras kept rolling, but no one behind them dared to breathe. This wasn't an interview anymore. It was a moment of truth, raw, unguarded, human. Caitríona attempted to steady herself, laughing weakly between tears. I'm sorry, this wasn't supposed to happen. You don't realize how much of yourself you leave behind in the stories you tell. Sam looked at her with a tenderness that words could never match. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and shaking. You never have to apologize for feeling. That's what makes you you. For a split second, the confident, unshakable Sam Heughan the world knew seemed to vanish, leaving behind a man fighting his own flood of emotion for someone he deeply cared about. It didn't feel like acting, one crew member later said. It felt like watching 2 people say goodbye to a version of themselves. As the segment neared its end, Caitríona wiped her cheeks again. Maybe regret isn't about mistakes, she whispered. Maybe it's about realizing what mattered before it's gone. Sam turned to her, eyes glistening. You still have time, he murmured. This time, the silence wasn't heavy, it was reverent. The kind reserved for truths that alter people. And when the cameras finally cut, no applause came. No movement, only stillness. For a long while, neither Sam nor Caitríona spoke. The crew stepped back, giving them space, as they sat in a silence that felt almost like its own presence. Sam's eyes were red, shining under the lights. He drew a breath, his hands still enclosing hers. You don't know how much that meant to me, he whispered. Caitríona's eyes widened at the vulnerability in his voice. Sam. He shook his head gently. You've carried so much. For all of us. For the show. For me. Hearing you say that, his voice caught. It reminded me that we're all human. That there are things we don't say until it's nearly too late. The moment felt sacred, years of friendship and trust distilled into a single breath of honesty. Not the bond of co-stars, but something deeper, quieter, enduring. A crew member later recalled seeing Sam discreetly wipe away tears as Caitríona squeezed his hand. He didn't want anyone to notice, they said. But he couldn't help it. It wasn't sadness. It was love, gratitude, and maybe a little heartbreak. In the final minutes, footage that would never air, Sam spoke with rare, unguarded sincerity. We all have regrets, he said softly. But if you'd said those words years ago, I don't think I would have understood him the way I do now. She tilted her head. Why? He smiled faintly. Because back then, we were still chasing the story. Now we've lived it. Caitríona let out a teary laugh, nodding as though she understood perfectly. And maybe she did. For nearly a decade, they had existed in each other's orbit as Claire and Jamie, as colleagues, as friends. They had grown together, stumbled together, endured headlines and rumors together. But in this quiet moment, stripped of scripts and spotlight, it was clear their bond had always been built on something rare, truth. Later, asked by a journalist about the emotional moment, Sam didn't evade it. We've shared so much, he said softly. Outlander changes you. She's one of the strongest, kindest people I know. Sometimes we forget to tell people how much they matter until it's almost too late. Fans felt it immediately, the softness, the mourning, the love in his voice. They flooded social media. You can't fake that. This wasn't acting. This was real. Even Caitríona, known for her composure, addressed the moment in a live Q&A. It was raw, she admitted. You hide behind a character for so long, and suddenly you realize your real self has been waiting in the wings. I think that day I stopped hiding. She paused, smiling gently. Sam has always been my anchor. The words echoed across the fandom, tender, bittersweet. Days later, Sam posted a black and white photo of the two of them from season 1. His caption read, "Some moments stay with you. Not because they're dramatic, but because they're honest. Thank you for sharing yours." Comments poured in, thousands thanking them for their vulnerability, their sincerity, for reminding the world that even after a decade of fame, there is still room for truth. Crew members later said it was one of the most emotional days they had ever witnessed. You could feel the love in the room, one said. Not romantic, something deeper. Two people who had walked through fire together, finally letting their walls drop. By the end of the day, Sam and Caitríona embraced quietly before leaving the studio. No words, just a long, heartfelt hug, a gentle farewell to an era. When fans eventually saw pieces of the interview, it became one of the most discussed moments in Outlander history, not for spectacle, but for sincerity. As one viral comment put it perfectly, "They taught us that love isn't always possession. Sometimes it's simply being fully present when it matters most." In the years that followed, people would look back on that unaired moment as something more than an interview. It was a quiet revelation, of gratitude, of regret, of a connection time could not erase. And for Sam Heughan, whose eyes had filled with tears that day, and for Caitríona Balfe, who finally spoke the words she had held for so long. It was perhaps the truest scene they ever lived, one that didn't need a script at all.